So you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. As you're turning there, or if you're already there, I wanted to share with you something that I've learned over the past 2 years. Today actually marks my wife and I's 2-year wedding anniversary. Yeah, thank you. It's been crazy, and it's kind of wild that it's already been 2 years, and in 2 years, let's just say I've learned a lot. It's been good. I'm not that crazy of a knucklehead. I am a little, but I've learned a lot of things. But there's something that I learned about myself that I kind of knew, but I started to realize really deeply. I hate losing. I specifically hate losing to my wife. I actually think it's more not just hate losing. I think I really love winning. So let me give you an example. About 2 years ago, when we got married, we were, bringing everything into our house, and at Target one day we found this game. I have a picture of it. It's called Here to Slay. Has anybody ever played that game before? Raise your hand if you've played Here to Slay. No one. Awesome. Super relatable story. So this game, really the premise of the game is you collect these like little cute hero guys, and you're trying to, that sounds so nerdy as I'm talking about it. So you collect these cute little heroes and you try to collect 7 of them. If you collect 7 of them, you win, or if you kill 3 monsters, you win the game. I know this is like the coolest and most gangster story you've ever heard, but that's the premise of the game. So my wife sees this and is doing the exact same thing you're doing and is like, I am not playing this game. I had to really convince her, and she was like, the only reason I'm going to play this is because I love you. So I was pretty confident going in because she had no desire to play this whatsoever. So we open it up and we play the first game, and I lose, which is interesting because she didn't even want to play in the first place. And I was like, okay, beginner's luck. And I was also a beginner, but it's okay. So we play a second round, and I lose again. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't really know what's going on. It seems like a pretty simple game. We play again, and I lose. And again, being someone who's super competitive and always wants to win, I was like, all right, babe, we're just going to call it quits today. We're not going to play this the rest of tonight. Well, let's try again. And so weeks go by. And I'm like, hey, let's play Here to Slay again. And she's like, yeah, that sounds good. And so we play again, and I lose again. Friends, let me tell you, for 1.5 years, I did not win. I didn't win. What I thought was going to be fun turned out to be war. I was about to get heated because I bought the game. I wanted to win. And like Carly's going to be here tonight. You can ask her. I have never beaten her at this game. I wasn't just losing. I was losing my cool. Like genuinely, I was about to get to the point the last time we played where I was like Jesus in the temple. I was about to flip our dining room table. I was so mad. I literally told her, babe, we are never playing this game again. And I'll tell you, I'm a man of my word, and we've never played it again. Like, I got so mad because I really, really wanted to win. But I actually kind of took a moment, and I was like, why in the world am I so worked up about this, like, cute little game that my young adult ministry will make fun of me that I play? Why am I, like, so worked up about this? When I thought about it a little bit more, and just especially into this week, what I realized about myself, a little self-analysis, is it was less about losing the game, and it actually felt like I was losing a little bit of my worth. I actually felt, I know that's silly, but like there's something inside of me where if there's a score to something and I don't win, I feel less if I lose. And with my wife, it was exponentially more because for some reason I was so competitive that beating my wife felt like a big accomplishment, which, friends, let me tell you, that is not good marriage advice. But I was sitting with this as I was thinking through it this week, and I felt this desire not only to win in a board game, but I started to realize that I had a desire to win in almost every aspect of my life. And the danger with wanting to win and keeping score at all times is, whether it's in games or arguments in relationships, wanting to win creates competition, which is fine when it's kept in football or it's kept in a board game, but it's scary when winning creeps into our relationships. Because here's the danger. In the race to win against a person, we actually lose sight of what matters. We lose sight of connection. We lose sight of peace. We lose sight of trust. So when we keep score in our relationships, eventually when we win, we actually don't win at all. We actually sacrifice the relationship itself. So what I hope to convince us of tonight, and as we walk through our text, the one thing I hope that you leave with is this. Winning is fine when it's kept in sports, but when you keep score with people, winning is always losing. That's the big idea for tonight. When keeping score with people, winning is always losing. What I mean with keeping score is when you do something right and someone else does something wrong, you immediately bump up the rankings. Or when they've had a track list and a progress and a pattern of they haven't done this, they haven't done this, they haven't done this, they haven't done this, they keep getting lower and somehow you keep getting better. That's what I mean when keeping score. So 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 through 7 says this. We're in this series called What Everyone Wants, because what everyone wants is love. Starting in verse 4, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. The phrase that we're going to really focus in on tonight is love keeps no record of being wrongs. Or in the Hunter Perry translation, it doesn't keep score. So here's my heart over the next few moments, and what I hope to convince you of is if you only try to win in your relationships, you will live a losing life. If you only try to win in your relationships, you will live a losing life. We actually see this happen in Scripture. There was one time where Jesus was teaching to a group of people, and he was using these things called parables. And parables are stories that connect a kind of a mystical and fictional story to a moral and real truth. And Jesus was really good at them. And he was telling 3 different stories to communicate the same thing. He was communicating to people that no matter what, and no matter how far you feel lost or how broken you feel, he loves each person enough to chase after them. He tells a story of a lost coin. He tells a story of a lost sheep. And in each one, he goes and finds them. And then he tells a story of this prodigal son. A son that tries to take its inheritance and run away from his father. So he picks up in Luke 15, verse 11. So if you have your Bibles, it's the 3rd book in the New Testament, Luke 15. You can flip there. But what I want us to do, we're going to read verses 11 through 32. There's 3 characters in this story. There's a father, and there's 2 sons. There's an older brother and a younger brother. The younger brother is going to take his inheritance and run. And what I want you to look at as we get closer to the end of the story is the relationship between the brothers. One of them is going to keep score, and one of them is going to come home. Okay, so let's work this out and let's see. Try to find some scorekeeping tendencies. So starting in verse 11, we'll read all the way to verse 32. So it says, to illustrate this point farther, being that he will run after anyone, Jesus told him this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. About that time, his money ran out. A great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have enough food. I just lost my place. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Pay attention to this. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him on the cheek. His son said to him, that's not in there, as a just joke, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son." This is really cool, verse 22. But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found." So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And he asked one of the servants what was going on. He said, "Your brother is back, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We're celebrating because of his safe return." The brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I have slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to do. And in all the time you never gave me one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf." His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." The story of the prodigal son, the story of a son who recklessly and wastefully and extravagantly wasted an inheritance of a very low place in his life. And I'm sure all of us know people like this, or maybe you were this person at some point. Jesus is communicating here that he is the father who runs out to meet the prodigal son. And if you believe in Jesus, this is what he did for you. When he sees the prodigal son, he brings him a finest robe, a ring, and sandals for his feet. And then he pulls out the Traeger and he throws a barbecue. He welcomes him home in the best way possible. And all these things communicate how much he loves him, where he belongs, and the authority that the father has to bring him back in to the home. And it's so cool because what Jesus has been saying in this whole chapter of Luke 15 is that no matter how lost you are, I can find you. No matter how broken you feel, I am waiting for you. I am there to love you. I'm here to receive you with open arms and with blessing and to throw a party. It says in the Bible that when you come home and you confess your belief in Jesus and you declare him as Lord, that the angels in heaven are praising. That's the party that Jesus is symbolizing here. That's the love of Jesus for each person in this room. The tension and the reason we're talking about it today is because some of us, and if we're honest, maybe most of us, are like the older brother who doesn't always have the same response. In fact, it's actually the opposite of the father. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk back through the brother's response to his younger brother, prodigal son, who ran away. The reason why is because we might not have had a brother or a family member who's like this, but we might have had a friend like this. We might have had a coworker like this. We might have had a boss like this. Might have had a relationship like this. And if you and I are not careful, we can apply the older brother's principles to our everyday relationships. And so as we walk through this, we're going to see kind of what costs us relationally if we take the position of the older brother and not the father. So there's going to be 5 things, but before we get into those, we're going to go back into verse 25 through 28. So Luke 15, verse 25 through 28 says, "Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working." Something you know about the older son is that he always does what the father tells him. So crazy thing, the brother is obedient to the father. So this does not exclude Christians. This includes people who confess their obedience to God. He's working. He's doing what the father asks. But he hears music and dancing. Verse 26, he asked one of the servants what was going on. He says, "Your brother is back, and your father has killed the fattened calf. And we are celebrating because of his safe return. But verse 28 says the older brother was angry. This word for anger here is not just like mad or upset or like disturbed. This word means a fixed anger. It means premeditated. It means you've thought about this for a long time. This anger has been sat upon and thought about and unresolved. And so what that kind of anger is the word for bitterness. He became bitter. The first relational cost, if we have the position of the older brother, is that in our relationships, you will cultivate bitterness. The first relational cost when you keep score with people is you cultivate bitterness. The older brother had unresolved anger towards his younger brother. And guys, trust me, I get it. Because this dude stole his inheritance way before he deserved it. He went and squandered it. He was completely irresponsible. He was inappropriate with it. And I totally get that. And I'm sure that you know people or have friends or family that have done very similar. But the danger about this kind of anger is this kind of anger for the older brother, it starts out as righteous anger. Because what he's mad about is his brother sinning. He's mad that his brother was irresponsible and inappropriate with his money. That's what he's mad about. And it's okay to have righteous anger. Jesus had righteous anger. Anger isn't a bad thing. It's okay to have anger, but it's not okay when anger has you. And so anger started to sit in the older brother and started to sit there undealt with for a while, and it turned into resentment. And then it turned into bitterness. So when he even hears that his brother is home, he's angry. It's so much different from the father's response. You and I, though, if we keep our anger towards a person for too long, even if it's righteous, you hold righteous anger for too long, it'll turn into resentment. Hold resentment too long, it'll turn into bitterness. And if you hold on to bitterness too long, it's like drinking poison and hoping someone else dies. It's only going to hurt us. Which is why the author of Hebrews says this in chapter 12, verse 5. It says, "See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled." Here's what he's saying. If we are people of bitterness, we don't receive grace. And not just grace from anyone, grace from God. So if we don't extend grace to others, we won't receive grace from God. Hear it again. If we don't extend grace to others, we will not receive grace from God. Now, bitterness, it will only cause hurt to you and the other person. But keeping score starts with something as simple as this. Someone hurts your feelings, you don't address it, and it sits there for days and weeks and months. And then you create this narrative in your head about the person that's not even true. And then you're so mad at them that you blow up on them one day, and then you don't have a relationship anymore. When you could have just hit it right when it happened. That's the danger of bitterness. So the son comes home, and the brother goes to him, and as soon as he hears, he's angry. And then we keep reading in verse 28. It says he was angry and wouldn't go in. And so the servants are like, "Hey, father, your son's not coming outside. I don't know why, but he's really angry." He's like, "Can you come talk to him?" And it's funny that he's the older brother because he's acting like a toddler. So he's like, can you come help me out? And he's like, yeah. So the father comes outside, and he has to beg him to come in. See, the father sees the son far off, and he immediately goes and forgives him and brings him in. But the brother is still keeping score. He can't bring himself to forgive. The second cost of keeping score in our relationships is you complicate forgiveness. You complicate forgiveness. You see, the older brother can't forgive because he doesn't actually believe his younger brother deserves it. He's done too many wrong things. I told him so. I told him not to do it. I knew he was going to do that. He doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I told my sister if she does that, she dates that boy, if she moves in with him, I knew that was going to happen. I told my coworker if he goes behind my back, this is going to happen. You see how things start to move in our hearts? It complicates forgiveness because they deserved it. And so why would I forgive them in my heart if they deserved it? I wonder if you and I felt the same way about someone else. Jesus says this in Matthew 6 about forgiveness, though. It's in verse 14 and 15. It says, if you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. Verse 15, but if you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins. So far, this is why keeping score in relationships is important. If you elevate yourself and you downgrade others, this is why it's important that we don't do that. Because the first thing we lose is if we're bitter and not graceful, we lose out on God's grace. And if we don't forgive, we lose out on his forgiveness. Like, I don't know, maybe for you, but maybe your roommate like continually forgets to clean up after themselves, or if you're married, like your spouse forgets to take out the trash, or your friends like keep flaking on your plans. Like, I don't know what it is for you, but if you're not careful and you let those things stack and you keep pushing those people down in your mind, like you might feel better and better and you might feel like you're winning, but your relationship will start to be less and less and it will start losing. Now here's the flip side though. Truth still exists. Like the prodigal son was really irresponsible. And the father forgave him still. Like, if you think about it, the brother's not out half of his money. The father is. The father gave away half of everything he's ever made. He practically lost 50% of everything he was going to leave to his sons. Actually, I think inheritance was actually almost all of it. I don't know. But he lost so much money. But yet he still forgave. And money is one of the hardest things and closest to our heart, but he still forgave. But the brother is holding on to what he's done. But if we call ourselves Christians, if we call ourselves people that have the love of God in us, the love of God will never lead you to bitterness. It will always lead you to forgiveness. Won't lead you to bitterness. It will always lead you to forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is interesting because forgiveness isn't just reconciliation. You might have been told that you need to forgive that person and confront that person and go talk to that person, and that is a very, very good thing if someone wrongs you, but that's reconciliation. Forgiveness is about your heart and how you see them. It's forgiving them in your heart. I want to tell you this, not all forgiveness leads to full reconciliation. There are some people that like the boundaries you need to put up because they're toxic and abusive and wrongdoing to you. Reconciliation is almost incomplete and impossible, but forgiveness can still happen. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it doesn't need the bitterness, it leads to forgiveness. But the brother continues. We haven't even heard him talk yet, and this is just crazy what he says in verse 29. He says, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me. In all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. And if I've got to be honest, this might be the most diva verse in the whole Bible. He's like, Daddy, I've slaved for you forever, and you've never given me a single thing. Like, Daddy, you've never given me one young goat for a feast with my friends. Like, Dad, like I've done all this work for you. He's like, come on, please, like give me something. Like, it's so childish. But what's crazy is what the brother is doing there with his words is in the father's mind. What he's trying to do, and this is what we do with people, is what you do is you don't actually try to seek advice from people. You try to seek allegiance with other people. What he's trying to do with his words is he's trying to distance the relationship with his father and his other son. He's trying to gain his father to his side, not actually be on the son's side. He's trying to get an allegiance. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to create distance between his father and the younger son. Because already in his heart, he's created so much distance between himself and his brother. The third thing that keeping score does is it creates emotional distance. It creates emotional distance. You see, he completely disregards the fact that his brother is home. Like, this would be like you losing a family member for years, and then them showing back up to the doorstep, and all you have to say is, how dare you? And not like, welcome home. Like, this is a crazy scenario. But if you and I are not careful, I know it's not all on the same level, but if you and I are not careful, if we allow bitterness and unforgiveness to sink into our lives, it will create emotional distance with our friends and our spouses, our families, our kids one day. Because if you are distant in your internal relationships, you will be distant in your external relationships. And if you want to know where distance starts internally, it's with you and the Father. And so if you start to feel distance externally with people, start looking at your actions, start looking at your words, and then start looking at your words to Him. Where's that distance there? Here's a good barometer for you. If you feel any kind of deep feelings or hurts or emotions towards a person when you think about them, you need to realize there's distance already being created. Whether it's a crack in the road or a big split in the road, it's a pothole, or whether it's something else, you just don't want it to get to the Grand Canyon. Because if we're not careful, things left unaddressed will continue to grow. And what we need to do is forgive them. We need to be the person to forgive them and extend love first. But in order to do that, we have to sacrifice our pride. We have to be willing to love that person before they maybe love us first. Why? Because 1 John 4:20, John says this, if someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we can't see? I don't know if you've read 1 John, but John just spits bars the whole time. Like, you go read his letter. It's crazy, though. Because here's the deal. We've read 3 different points, and we've talked about 3 different things. And if you keep score with people, you lose out on 3 things from God. If you keep bitterness, you lose out on His grace. If you keep unforgiveness, you lose out on His forgiveness. And if you create distance and you don't love, you miss out on His love. Friends, you got to realize, this relationship and this brokenness between how we keep score with people, if we think we're better than others, it's not just a external thing. This is also a keeping score between you and God. And friends, we don't win that battle on our own. And so we have to start evaluating things. But the son continues because, as we know, he's kind of a toddler. Verse 30 in Luke 15, he says, yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. So the brother takes it from this like interpersonal thing, and he's kind of just like roasting his brother. He takes it and he actually makes it personal and hurtful. And here we start to see his insecurity towards his brother. This is where we really start to see how good, because what was he doing before this? He was working. He was doing what his father asked him to do. So in his mind, he's so much better. So this verse is actually really sad. Because the first thing he does, he actually doesn't acknowledge that this guy is his brother anymore. He says, this son of yours. In his mind, he's actually erased the association he has with his brother. He doesn't even see this guy that way anymore. Like, he has kicked him and he has distanced himself so much. He's like, this guy isn't even family anymore. A brother of mine would not do that. So he says, this son of yours. So he makes a judgment and condemnation against his brother. But he doesn't only do that. He insults his father. He says, then you celebrate him. You see, he's not just questioning his brother's character, he's questioning his father's character. See, if we start keeping score with people, you will start to do things that are completely unlike who you might actually be. This son is obedient in his work, but not in his words. That's the danger for some of us, is you might be obedient in your works, but what about your words? What about how you speak with people? Because here's a big danger. You and I can get to such a place that we don't just have grace for people. We actually get mad at God for showing grace to people. Like, think about the person that if they got saved, you'd be really upset. It's a crazy thought. But for some people in this room, you might have thought of somebody. If I'm honest, I thought of someone myself. We create distance with people. We evaluate people in our heads. And there's some people that if we're really honest, we never want to show grace. Because of how they treated us, how they treat other people. But imagine if the Father saw them walking home, what he would do. It's very interesting. But one of the final levels of this with keeping score is the fourth cost of keeping score is you cut off grace. You cut off grace. This is where winning on a relational scoreboard turns into losing. Because when you cut off grace, you cut off anyone's ability to trust you. You cut off your ability to be patient, and you cut off your ability to accept anyone into your circle again. Everyone has to prove themselves to you. Everyone's on a tight leash. And what's crazy is if someone did something to you, you continually bring it up. As if it was like an inside joke. It's like the elephant in the room, and you just always bring it up, even if it's been months and years. And if we get to this point like the older brother, it will kill any progress that you hope to have in your relationships. Because what the older brother did is he put his younger brother's worth equal to spending money on prostitutes. And then he put his father's work on celebrating someone who would spend their money on prostitutes. We equate people verse off of what they've done in their past and not how our Father sees them in the present. We have to be very, very careful with this. Because if you stick in this mindset, if you always think that you are better than other people, you will always be the victim. You will always be the person that, oh my gosh, did you hear what they said to me? Did you hear how they treated me? Like, oh my God, you're the main character of every story. Like, you will become the victim. And friends, can I tell you this? Can I just be really honest with you? No one wants to be friends with the victim. They want to be friends with someone that runs out to them and extends them grace. And that accepts them, even in a moment of bad actions or maybe poor intentions. They want a friend that loves them and cares for them and that would die for them. Maybe not literally, that's kind of crazy, but theoretically. Like, that's the kind of friends that you and I want. Because here's the deal. The Father thinks so much differently. So if we are going to be like the Father, if we're going to be like Jesus, we have to think so differently. Because Ephesians 2:8-9 says this, God saved you by what? His grace when you believed. It doesn't say that you had to work for it. Your sins didn't even come into account. He did it because of his grace. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Verse 9, salvation is not a reward for the good things you have done. So none of us can boast about it. The prodigal son did not earn the party. He did not earn the robe or the ring or the sandals. He didn't earn the love. He didn't earn the acceptance back. He didn't earn any of it. It was given to him by grace. So why do you and I cut off the prodigal people in our lives? Because we don't want to extend grace. See, friends in the room who call themselves Christians, if you've been accepted by grace, why do we not extend it as frequently as maybe we should? I don't have the answer for that. I just think we're selfish. I think I'm selfish because I like my life the way I want it. I like my people. I like my circle. Extending grace outside of that, that's hard for me. But I'm selfish. But the Father's not selfish. Instead, he's selfless. Because look how the Father responds. Look how Jesus says the Father responds in verse 31. His Father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. But then he said to him, pretty much, bro, you don't get it. We had to celebrate this happy day. Why? Because your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he was found. Friends, you and I can get stuck so thinking about ourselves that when we see people come to life or we see people break out of something like an addiction or a cycle or something, it's more like they kind of deserve that, not oh my gosh, welcome home. The question that you and I have to answer is, are you going to welcome people in? Are you going to extend grace? even when you've been hurt, even when your scoreboard reads, Tyler is 75 and Mindy's like 4. Like she's way down there. She's Mrs. Struggle. Like she's just there. I don't know if she needs a boo thing, but she needs to like get back up. Like she's just struggling. I don't know where in relationships where you are. But if we're honest, isn't what everything that we crave is a relationship where someone shows us grace, where someone doesn't keep score with us, and where someone leads the way with truth? Like for those people who are married in here and those people who want to be married one day, don't you want to marry someone who extends grace to you when you mess up and doesn't hold things against you when you do something wrong? And then also leads the way in truth and is like, hey, I know that what you did was wrong, but like, let's go here. Because I'm sure the story continues where the father was like, hey, prodigal son, we threw the story, but the next morning he's like, bro, why did you do that? Like, you didn't have to waste all that money. Like, conversations need to happen. But friends, your people in your life don't need to get better before you extend grace. Look at what Romans 5:8 says. But God showed his great love for us by doing what? Sending Christ to die for us while we were what? Still sinners. Does that say when we got better? No. Does that say when we got everything put together? No. Does that say when we got all buttoned up and looked nice? No. While we were still sinners. So friends, what we truly crave in our lives is for people to extend grace to us. And do you know what people in your life deeply crave? For you to extend grace to them. They deeply crave for you to be truthful with them. They deeply crave for you to accept them into your arms in grace and truth while they're still a mess. Really, what I can tell you is this all kind of boils down to the balance of grace and truth. So here's what I'll tell you. The balance of that is love with grace and lead with truth. Love with grace and lead with truth. Because the father ran out in love and he hugged him and he loved him with it. But I promise you they had a conversation, whether it was at the party or after. Because I'll tell you this, Jesus doesn't just meet you where you are to save you and leave you there. Jesus meets you where you are to save you and love you and take you somewhere better. He leads you back to his truth. He wants you to follow his word. So what I want to do as we've kind of walked through all of this is to give you some practical things that you can kind of turn off the scoreboard in your relationships with other people. Okay, so there's 5 things that relationally cost you, and there will also be 5 things that you can apply in your life that turns off the scoreboard between you and people. Okay, so there's 5 of them. The first one is track wins, not losses. So keep tabs on the positive things. Don't make a list for every mistake. Like instead of pointing out everything that someone does wrong, maybe reinforce something they've done right. Because what gets celebrated gets repeated. If you celebrate it, they'll repeat it. So I know like I'm guilty of it. I leave my socks everywhere. I leave my clothes everywhere. And Carly, I know, looks at them and she's like, gosh dang, can you pick those up? And I'm like, yes, I can. But like, what you don't need to do is when someone does something nice for you and you only see the one thing they didn't do. So track wins, not losses. Second, let the little things slide. Some stuff is not worth a fight. Some stuff isn't even worth you bringing up. Like if someone's shoes are left out, if it's your roommate, or someone forgot to take out the trash, maybe instead of bringing it up to them this time, you take it out for them. Maybe you clean up what they should have cleaned up. Because I promise you, if you do it for them and they see that you did it for them, they'll probably feel a little bit of like, oh man, they did it for me and I should have done that. There'll be a little bit of desperation, so let the little thing slide. Third, ditch the pedestal. Because Hannah Montana said, nobody's perfect. I got to work it again and again to get it right, okay? You're not perfect. I don't know who needs to tell you that. If it's me tonight, you're not perfect. You're not Mrs. Right. You're not Mr. Right either. Like, nobody has it all together. And so don't hold yourself or anybody else to a perfect standard because no one's going to fit it. Ditch the pedestal. Throw it away. Nothing should make you better in a relationship because a relationship is bigger than who's perfect. Fourth, work together, not against. In your relationship with people, you are not opponents. You are a team, especially in spousal relationships. I don't even know if that's a word. Marriage relationships. So ask how you can help, maybe do chores together or create this team environment where you can work together instead of create resentment. Lastly, speak before you snap. I think this is the biggest fallout for most of us, is we let small annoyances build up to really big things. And we don't actually address them before they blow up out of proportion. And friends, here's something. When you have a hard conversation, say everything. Don't just say 90% of it and leave out the 10 that actually does matter. Say it all, even if it's hard and uncomfortable. Because here's what I've come to know. Holding on to bitterness and unforgiveness and resentment will only ever hurt you. But living in grace, leading with truth, and loving with love will heal you. Why? Because when you keep score in relationships, winning is always losing. But when you get rid of the scoreboard, winning is winning. So what if those of us in this room actually stopped keeping score? What if we chose to live in the same way that the Father does to the prodigal son? Meeting people where they're at on their journey home and helping them grow out of that and not holding every misstep against them. And we do that if we track wins and we let little things go and we work together and we reflect the heart of Christ. Because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and that's our standard. So while people are still messy, we should still love them. While people are still messy, we should extend grace. And yes, there is still truth. You got to have both. But friends, no one will listen to your truth if you don't show them love first. Got to build that equity with relationship first. So friends, what if we were people that threw away the scoreboard in our relationships? I challenge you over this week to turn off the scoreboard in your relationships. To think about places where you can show grace even when it's undeserved. Forgive people before they ask for it. And love people before they earn it. Because when we do, what we don't realize is that it's not only them that will experience freedom, it's you too. Because when we reflect the heart of God to people around us, that's how we win. When we love people in the middle of their mess, not when they get better, that's how we win. When we're together. Let's be people that turn off the scoreboard. Would you pray with me? Jesus, there are ways in each and every one of our lives. There's moments, there's relationships, there's traumas, there's hurts, there's fears, there's passions, there's beliefs that with good intentions are great on their own, but when they have anger in them, it makes us bitter. So God, what I am asking in this room tonight for the people that are in this room that listened to what you had to say through your word, would you create a new heart in these people to be gracious? That in a moment where someone hurts them or wrongs them, where they feel angry, God, would they take that to you first? Because you are the Father who runs out to the prodigal. You were the one who ran out to us. You were the one who ran out to me, who met me on the road when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to, who in college was completely running away from you, who came back, and I felt like I was so lonely, but there you met me on the road, and you brought me in, and I've never experienced a love like that. God, what's crazy is we can extend that love to people. Would you create a heart in us of flesh and not stone, that sees people how you see them, that extends grace how you extend grace, so that we might be people that show love, and so that people might be able to see you. God, I pray that over this room. I pray that over our time. We love you, Lord. Amen.